Well, welcome to the Men's Convention 2015. It's great to see you here. My name's Andrew. If this is your first Men's Convention, who's been to a Men's Convention before? Yeah, a few people? Great. You know, it's something I'm sure will catch on in Dubai, but so far it's a weird concept. In fact, when we were marketing this, we actually had a woman come and say, "Hey, can I come?" I said, "No, that's a men's convention. That's the idea, men." If you've not been before, what can you expect? Well, there's a few things to differentiate a men's convention, I think, from other conventions. One is the chair spacing. You notice you've got a bit more room between the... Yeah, that's right. That's intentional. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. You'll probably also notice there's only men here. That's another thing that differentiates it. And the other thing is our bookstore. You know, men, I think, are overwhelmed with choice. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah, we've made it really easy. We've got 4 books for sale. 4 different titles, one of which is a book by our speaker, and I encourage you to read it. Matt Fuller's book. I've got through about half of it so far. Really wonderful book, and there's 3 other, I think, or 4 other books there you can choose from. We've made it so easy. If you can't make a decision with 4 choices, you know, I'm sorry, we can't help you. But lots thinking about the sort of frailties of man. I heard a story during the week about the creation story when God comes to Adam and says, "Listen, I'm going to give you a perfect helper. Her name's going to be woman. She's going to be amazing. She's going to be perfect in every way. She'll be able to drive a car, read a map, cook. She'll be gorgeous. All the things you could ever want. She'll be it. But the only thing is, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you a right leg, your left arm, and an eye." Adam thinks for a moment, thinks, "What could I get for a rib?" Yeah, there you go. Yeah, well, I say that. Thank you, Stuart. That was Stuart's. I say that, but you know, our wives, many of us have left wives. I know I did. Walked out the door around the mad hour. Anybody else do that? Yeah, see you later. Good luck. Bath time and bedtime. But if you're in that position, make sure you let your wife know how much you appreciate you being here today. We've got a lot to look forward to this week, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. And the first thing I've got to do is a concession to my age. That is the first time I've had to wear glasses on stage. Can you believe it? 46 does that, doesn't it? Oh, look, I can read it now. That's great. I met a guy during the week, and it was for work, and he told me about this study that he read to do with men's health. And obviously completely unrelated to this conference. But he said there was a study done by Harvard, and the study was around the health of men and how to improve the health of men. And what they discovered, and in some ways it seems so obvious, is that you are generally only as healthy as your best mates. You're only as healthy as your best mates. And so if you want to get healthy, the conclusion was either change your mates or help them get healthy. Change your mates or help them get healthy. Thought, how profound is that when it comes to our faith? If you want to grow, help your mates grow in Jesus, because then you'll grow too. If you want to grow in Jesus, help your mates grow. And this morning's talk, I thought, was just so good like that, wasn't it? Just such a good reminder of the importance of us as men caring for and loving one another. So the sort of the wisdom of the world, crossing over with the wisdom of God. And because we think that's so important that men get together with men, that's why we have this convention, this conference. But also tomorrow you're going to see a couple of little snapshots called In the Shed. And In the Shed is kind of we're trying to model what it might look like to talk to a mate about a tough issue like marriage, for example. Something that might not normally come up in a conversation with a friend. We're going to do that over the next couple of, tomorrow. There's going to be a couple of those little 4-minute spots where we want you to see how you can have that kind of conversation with somebody and help take them one step closer to Jesus. So look out for those, and hopefully they'll help you. Well, I've noticed a few guys sort of sitting on their own, and what's the point in doing that? Turn around and say good day to the people around you, and get to know them for just 30 seconds, and make sure you connect. Now, most of you, I hope, would have heard Matt this morning at church as he spoke to us over the 3 services. So you would have heard his interview. So I don't want to repeat those questions, but I just wanted to ask Matt a couple of questions as we get into tonight. Thanks for coming, by the way.
Pleasure, my pleasure.
Really great to have you here in Dubai. I hope you can come back with your family at some time and enjoy more of it. It's a little bit cool now, you would have noticed. We're a bit a bit chilly on these cold days.
Cold days. Well, it's pretty weird coming from London on whatever day it was, Thursday. It starts raining, everyone goes, "Way!" We don't do that in London.
We love that. I really was encouraged by your talk this morning, and I was struck by the story you told about your mate who let you down at a time of great need. And I was wondering, how did you forgive him? Or was that hard?
It was hard, actually, because he's been a good friend for many years, and he didn't really acknowledge that he'd got it wrong. And others told him, "You bogged that." And he said, "Oh, you're oversteady." So actually, it's hard. It's really hard to, it's very hard to forgive someone fully if they don't acknowledge they need it. And that's why it really was just going back to the cross. I'm a sinner. I need to be forgiven. And dwelling upon that, dwelling upon Christ's willingness to forgive me, despite the fact that even though now as a believer I repeatedly do things which disappoint him, let him down, there's still forgiveness there for me, and thinking that's what I'm called to do. But I wouldn't say for a moment I did it very well, didn't find it easy, and our friendship is not what it was, in truth, because I don't think it can be, and I think that's right biblically, until someone acknowledges that, I'm not sure you can be fully reconciled completely.
This is really helpful. I'm sure all of us can relate to that, if not to a mate, then to our wife or to a family member. And just, I think, coming back to the cross time and time again is the only way you can actually... Give us an insight into the sort of things that you most pray for in the privacy of your home or wherever you pray. Give us a sense of what's on your mind most when you're praying.
I'd love to tell you a number of things, but the true answer is probably myself, let's be honest. I don't know, I'm unremarkable in my prayer life. I, from a young age as a Christian, found the little acronym ACTS quite helpful. So when you come before the Lord and you read something in the Bible, in the scriptures in the morning, to act, adore, confess, give thanks, and then the odd one, supplicate, which is to ask. So whatever you read in the scriptures, you think, I can adore you for that. I confess I've fallen short of that. I thank you that Jesus has paid for me in this regard, whatever it is you've been reading. And I pray I would grow in that area, which to my mind just seems a good way to start the day. You're acknowledging each day that you need Jesus. You're a sinner. He's a saviour. Seems like, to me, a good way of starting the day. So there's that. And then I'm a list man. I don't know about you guys. I can't function without lists. So I have my prayer diary and every day for 30 days of the month, not 31, but 30 days of the month, and pray for the same things on the first, on the second, on the third. And it goes on like that.
That's helpful. I mean, I guess all of us struggle with prayer in different ways, and to hear how somebody else goes about it, lists are great, and I'm glad you're an advocate of them. Last question. You talked today about the kind of the importance of friendship, and it was really helpful to be encouraged from Proverbs and that. But I thought it's really hard for men to actually say, you know what, I've just landed in Dubai, or I've been here 2 or 3 years, and I actually don't have any friends like you talked about this morning.
Yep.
I'm really lonely. But how do you acknowledge that without sounding like or feeling like you're a loser? Or even how do you, even just to speak it out and say to somebody, hey, look, I'm really lonely here in Dubai, just as so hard for a man to do, anybody to do, but especially a man. How do you get started?
You get started, I think, by saying, want to go for a beer? That's quite often, I think. And some people are better at that than others. And just chatting. And some people, I think, are willing to, do you have the phrase, push the envelope? They're willing to open up faster. Probably about in our morning congregation, at the risk of racial stereotyping, about a third are American, and they're much better than Brits or Aussies at being honest quickly, I think. And that's a cultural thing, and our whole church benefits from them. If I'm a Brit and you're a Brit, we're having this sort of conversation like this. That's just, we like our personal space, and this is, a bit odd. And so again, those who come to London from Africa, they break down because they're all over you like this, and you think, well, okay, we're going for it, are we? That's all right. And so some things are cultural, and different cultures can help. in that regard. But I think it just starts with, want to go for a beer?
Yep.
Want a game of squash?
Yeah.
There's a sense, there's a psychological, it's a bit dull. I read this thing the other day about a psychological study into children. When they put two children in a room just with no toys, and the kids were 6, all these, they took a class of 6, and they did it with different combinations. And the girls, whenever the girls put water, they got the 2 chairs and sat next to one another and talked like this. And the boys had their chairs facing one another like that and sort of struggled to converse a little more. And there's a sense in which that's okay. We're blokes. And often, rather than sitting down and let's have coffee for 2 hours, we just say, want a beer? Want to help me build a shelf? Want to help me come and clear out my garage? An activity. We like doing stuff together, don't we?
Absolutely.
And that bonds.
That's really helpful. And I just
It's got to start, though, isn't it? Before you say, we've met for 5 minutes. Let me tell you about my marriage, and you pour out everything. You need a bit of context.
A little warm up.
Yeah.
We're not all American, are we? Sorry. Yeah, look, that's really helpful. And I just want to encourage you guys, as I was this morning. I thought, we need to be able to say to each other, hey, let's catch up and have a beer, or let's go out and go for a ride on the bike, or go dune bashing in the desert, or whatever. Let's get in the habit of doing that. And then as you hear the In the Sheds coming up tomorrow, think about that as well as a way to kind of be a bit more intentional about how we catch up with each other. But start with catching up.
And I still find my default setting is I like work. I'm quite good at work. I'm productive. People value me. I like my family. I don't like letting them down. And I probably should go for lunch with Mike this week, but there's plenty of other things on. And I do sometimes have to say, go to lunch with Mike. That's a good friendship. You value that friendship. Keep investing, otherwise we drift. And I don't know, maybe I don't think I'm completely abnormal. I don't think I'm completely abnormal. And we can easily get into that mindset, I think.
Yeah, great. Well, you're going to speak in a moment. I'm going to read the Bible, and this is one of my favourite passages, actually, so I'm pleased I'm reading it, and I assume you're speaking on it. So it's if you want to look it up, it's Matthew 11, verse 28 and 29. Here we go, it's on the screen. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks. I tell you what, I didn't bring myself an outline. Have you got an outline? Guys, there should be an outline of the talks. So 3 talks, and guys, here we go. Brilliant. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. You can see where we're going. Tonight, Matthew 11, Jesus gives rest. Tomorrow morning, how best to use our time, and then the sort of slightly daunting one where we try and put some stuff together. So the first 2 talks, we're putting some stakes in the ground, some pegs in the ground. I'm going to try and fill in the detail as much as possible in the last one. It's a great delight to do this sort of thing. I love men's gatherings. I don't know if it is a sort of newer thing in Dubai. Certainly in London, we've benefited from, big gatherings. We fill the Albert Hall every year for a men's convention, which is a great sort of historic venue. And we love gathering as men. And this is a topic which I think is particularly relevant for us. So in the end, I ended up writing this book for 2 reasons. One, as I said to some earlier, I got a bit fed up with feeling guilty. And I did feel that I was just letting everyone down. Everyone seemed a bit disappointed that I didn't give them a bit more time. My siblings, my parents, my family, staff at work. Everyone wanted more. So in fact, the working title of my book was Everyone Wants a Piece of Me. But the publisher said that's just negative. You can't call a book that. But that was one reason. But the other one was loads of the guys I loved at church, I observed them just struggling with this all the time. All the time. If you're a busy professional in London, it's just a complete juggle. And I think Dubai is pretty similar. Wouldn't we just love more time? And I guess often we can feel that there is a famine of time, never have enough. Never have enough to accomplish all our goals. There's not enough time to go for a beer with a friend, to ring a friend. There's not enough time to quite get everything done at work. There's not enough time to see the kids before they go to bed, and we've missed bedtime again. There's certainly not enough time to sit in a chair and read that thing that I'd love to have read, whatever it is, it's a James Bond novel or whatever it may be. So for years, I just had this little fantasy, which is, you know, the film Groundhog Day with Bill Murray, where he wakes up every morning to Sonny and Cher, I got you, babe, and he lives the same day over and over again. And initially, he just is desperate to get out of it. He resents it. And then he kind of embraces it, and he picks up useful skills. So he can't play the piano, but every day he goes for a piano lesson. And by the end of the film, he's sort of a virtuoso, and he sort of, plays anything on the piano. Wouldn't that be, I have that fantasy in my head. Do you not think it's Friday and you haven't got everything done? You think, oh, if only I could do this day 3 times over, that'd be great. And still, I think that way. I'm in a bit of trouble. I'm supposed to have written something else by Christmas. That's my deadline with a publisher. I'm not going to get it done. I think, oh, if only I could have Monday and write chapter 2, and then have Monday again and write chapter 3, and Monday. And wouldn't it be great if it gets to the end of Friday, you can just claw back somehow 4 hours, and then you've got enough time to get everything done. But unfortunately, it doesn't quite work like that. Or more importantly, my dad's dying of cancer. He's 81. He's not a believer. I want more time with him, because I don't know how much he's got. But there's never enough time. So what do? There isn't enough time. We'd love to have more of it, but there's never enough, and quite often we're just tired because life is busy. And if you travel and you're on a plane and you're here and there, or you commute, it's just tiring. A good friend of mine lived in Norway for a number of years. He tells me, I'm no expert, but unlike English, where we have one word, tired, which kind of does a whole lot of things, in Norwegian they have 3 very different words. One is a sort of tired, that is, I went to bed at 4 a.m. last night and could do with a decent night's sleep. I'm a bit tired. 2 is, I'm really whacked out. That is, I've been pulling a load of all-nighters at work for 2 weeks, and golly, I need a lie-in. I'm really tired. And then the 3rd is, I guess in English, it's close to burnt out. I'm really in trouble, tired. I think it'd be very useful to have a whole range of words for this thing of tiredness when we're struggling with time. We'd love to have more time. And I realized I had a problem when my son, aged 9, said to me, you know what? Sometimes it's exhausting being me. I thought, where's he picked up that language from? Probably from me. It's probably from me. I don't know about you, but in central London, the normal standard greetings of politeness is, how are you? And the standard response amongst men is, yeah, busy. That's what you do. You don't say well or fine. That's just what you do, which slightly creates this sort of culture that feeds into it. We need what Jesus offers here, which is rest. Salvation and satisfaction that comes from trusting in Jesus Christ. We need his rest. It's the most lovely invitation he issues. Isn't it lovely? He says to all of us here again, men, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Rest for your souls. Come, all of you. It's very lovely. Let me look at it in these 3 ways. Okay, they're on the sheet. But the exhaustion we feel, the rest that is offered, thirdly, the Saviour that calls. And you might get to the end of this one and think, well, that doesn't help me with my time. Well, it's crucial to have this one in place first. Who we are, what Jesus has done, how we live our lives. You've got to have this one in place first before we get to, in one sense, crunching the numbers. Okay, let's look at it this way then. First, the exhaustion we feel. The exhaustion we feel. Now, there are 2 elements that Jesus speaks about. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. 2 different things, weary, burdened. Now, weary is tiredness. It's, forgive me for a moment, it's a present active verb. In other words, it's what we do that exhausts us. weariness. A weariness that comes through relentless activity. I guess the English sort of phrase for it would be, I've run out of steam. That sort of sense. Weary, it's what we do. Burdened, by contrast, is what is done to us. Burdens, forgive me again for a moment, it's a passive, perfect verb. It's something dumped on you in the past. So the picture that Jesus has is this. It's as if you wake up in the morning and someone puts a whopping great bag of cement on each shoulder. You're burdened. Someone has put them on you. And therefore, going through life is wearying, because walking around with bags of cement on your shoulders is just much more tiring than walking around normally. So you weary yourself in your activity because you've been burdened. Do you get the idea? Burdens placed upon you. Weariness is just the exhaustion of trying to get through life with those burdens upon you. That's what Jesus is talking about. Okay, so what are the burdens? What are the burdens placed upon us? Well, in Matthew's gospel, the main one, Jesus explains, is what the Pharisees do. Jesus would say in Matthew 23, woe to the Pharisees, woe to them. They tie up heavy burdens and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger. So that's the primary sense Jesus would have you understand, or have us understand it. Back then, the Jewish Pharisees were saying, how do you relate to God? You have to keep these 613 rules. You keep 613 rules that we've discerned the Old Testament has, then God is happy with you. And Jesus says that's a burden. If you think your activity will save you, that's a burden. And some may know that from your past. I don't know, one or two may know that currently. Very starkly, this came home to me when I was at university. University days, I lived with 3 other guys, one of whom was a completely secular, good-time Jewish lad from North London. Jewish parents, but just completely nominal. He would go out and get drunk and sleep around. He had a terrific cackle. He had this mad sort of cackle, very popular guy. Paul, everyone loved Paul. He's great company, great fun, terrific. One summer, when we were living with him, he went off to Israel and worked on a kibbutz for a few months. And it changed him. And when he came back, he resolved he was going to live the life of a fully Orthodox Jew. That was fascinating to watch, that transformation, and tragic. Because, yes, physically, obviously he started to grow his hair and grow his ringlets. His behavior changed. And before very long, he had to move out from our house because he needed 2 sets of pans and 2 sinks in order to separate meat and milk. He couldn't live with us anymore. And he went from being, okay, Jack the lad, a bit naughty, but great fun, laughter in his life, to incredibly intense. And at the end of university, he went off and he studied in York to become a rabbi. Pretty serious, Lubavitch rabbi, if you know anything about Judaism. In that particular view, how the Lubavitch branch of Jews, how they live, will determine when their Messiah comes. So if the Lubavitch live a good and righteous life, their Messiah is more likely to come. If they live badly, less likely to come. Now that's pretty stressful to live that way. The only way he thinks that God will save him personally, and the only way that God will send a savior to this planet, is if he and his friends live morally enough. That's a burden. That's a big burden. And that's the fundamental one that Jesus is talking about here. Spiritually, that'll crush you. Just too hard. And Jesus primarily, I guess, would say, give up your yoke of thinking you can save yourself. Give up that yoke of spiritual self-reliance and trust me. Trust me. Now, that's the primary sense, I think, in which Jesus means this, come to me. But if you're a Christian, you should know that, if you are. But there are certain secular cousins of the same way of thinking. Let me give you a few. First, you can be burdened by the need to prove yourself. And now that is quite common, dare I say it, particularly amongst blokes. I had a moment of high culture back home a few months ago, and I ended up watching a documentary. It was about the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, which, if you didn't know, and I didn't know, is meant to be the best orchestra in the world. So if you're playing for the Philharmonic Orchestra, the Berlin Philharmonic, you are basically the best clarinetist, violinist, flautist, whatever it is, in the world. Well done you. And it was about them and the conductor, Simon Rattle, and they were touring China, which was a big deal because they'd never been to China. And this documentary was all about them. And I thought, oh, it's quite interesting. So I got involved and started watching this. Now, there were some trialists with them. That is, there were some people who weren't in, but were allowed to come and play and see if they were good enough to join that elite. They were stressed. They were racked with nerves. These are mature, people in their 30s, etc., 40s, and thinking, oh my goodness, if I get one note wrong, I've bogged it, I'm out. And you kind of expect that. It's like a job interview in one sense. It was just a prolonged job interview over several weeks. But the thing that was really interesting was the whole orchestra were racked with nerves. So the senior players who'd been in the orchestra for about 20 years, you see one or two of them interviewed and saying, it takes me a bit longer than it used to learn a piece. I hope no one notices. Well, you've just said it to camera now. They're bound to notice when they watch this afterwards. But anyway. My ears are going through being in the pit. I just can't quite follow as well as I used to. Or I missed a couple of notes there. Fortunately, I think I got away with it because if anyone noticed. And this whole orchestra, the best in the world, were racked with anxiety and racked with nerves. Now, that is an unusual setup, I guess. But there you are, you've made it to the very top of the best orchestra in the world, and you're nervous because you've got to prove yourself again and again and again. Now, I don't know what industries you're in, it'll vary. But I think particularly in this case of a guy called Phil, who's a banker in London, and I got to know through our kids playing rugby together. And he's a guy in his early 50s, done very well. But when I first met Phil, after a while, want a beer? Yeah, have a beer. Want to play squash? Yeah, when we'd gone through that sort of stage, and I got to know him a little bit, he said, I'm very anxious at work. Why are you anxious? My numbers aren't as good as they used to be. And the younger guys are gathering, the sharks gather underneath me. And if my numbers don't improve by April, I may be cold. But you've been there a long time. You've been successful there. Yeah, but you're only as good as last year's figures. And you think, oof, you're just like the blokes at the Philharmonic Orchestra. And if you feel that pressure, there's a constant need to prove yourself. Yeah, that's a burden. And that's one I guess some here will feel and know. That is a burden. But even if you're junior, you can still feel it. I've got to prove to myself, I've got to be successful, I've got to keep climbing the ladder. I want to be the youngest of my peers to make $1 million, to make it to partner, whatever it may be. Oh, I can affect you at any level, at any age. I've got to prove myself. And we recognize that's a burden, and that may distort us unhelpfully. That'd be one. Another little burden, a secular burden we can be burdened by expectations. Often be used in common parlance. We, in England, our sports team's variable in their quality. For a while, we've really struggled in football. One of the ex-England football managers was Italian, Fabio Capello. Rugby. Sorry? Rugby. Why have you just said that to me? Yeah. You've just all shouted that at me. That's really mean. You're a mean bunch of men. In football as well, we'd struggled. But Fabio Capello, the manager, he always said, the problem is the England shirt, it is too heavy. That's French, isn't it? That's a French accent. I've got that badly wrong. Anyway, run with it. The England shirt, it's too heavy. What does he mean by that? Burdened. These players who are brilliant at club level, they play for their country and they're burdened. People expect too much. It's quite common. And sometimes it's the expectations of others placed upon us. It can be a spouse, it can be parents. I've got to prove to them, I'm going to be successful as Dad was. I'm going to do that. going to show them I made the right decision. But sometimes spouses, darling, why don't we live in a house as good as theirs? Well, why aren't you earning as much money as Daphne's husband? And the expectations of others sort of, again, can distort us, how we think, how we act. That can be a burden. The expectations of others. So burdened by a need to prove myself, burdened by expectations of others. Here's a third, then we'll move on. Burdened by wanting to be in control. And that's my issue, if you're interested. Burdened by a need to be in control. If I just had X amount in the bank, I'd relax, because I know it would be safe. If I can just get my kids into that school, their future's secure, and I don't need to worry. If I can just, how am I going to do it? Well, maybe if I get into the office just another hour earlier, then I'll be in control. And I like to be in control, personally. Makes me feel comfortable when I can control everything. So I feel this one acutely. But the problem is if you're driven by that, essentially it's anxiety. Unless I can control this, I feel nervous. Fear is driving you then. And often in our workplaces, it's fear that will drive us into overwork. I found this out recently. You know, in Japanese, so I'm told. Anyone from Japan here? But in Japanese, so I'm told, the phrase overwork is, let me get this right, karoshi. And it literally means death by overwork. That's pretty serious, isn't it? We might say, oh, he's a workaholic. And the Japanese would say, he is dead by overwork. I mean, that's quite severe, isn't it? But often that is driven by fear. Not always. But anxiety. If only I can, then I'll be in control. And do you see how they're just all burdens? They're just dumped on us. And therefore, to go through life with burdens dumped on us is exhausting. And we'll weary ourselves trying to get that right. It's not all. Many other burdens, just 3. Okay, the exhaustion we feel. That's often why we feel exhausted. It's too simplistic, you say. I know. Hold on. The exhaustion we feel. Secondly, let's look at the rest that is offered, what Jesus offers. So verse 28, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn from me. I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. It's a lovely expression, isn't it? Come to me and find rest for your souls. Now, what is he saying? He says, take one yoke off yourself. Take off the burden of trying to prove yourself. Take off the burden of expectation, the burden of trying to be in control. Take those burdens off. Take off your self-reliance. Take off the attempt to achieve your way to greatness. Don't come to me, and I will give you rest. That is, I'll give you salvation, and I'll give you contentment. I'll give you satisfaction. You can learn from me a sustainable pattern of life. We try to put it this way. A few months ago at home, I wanted to block up a door, a sort of doorway that kind of went to an old coal cellar in our house. You know, it's an old 19th century house we live in. And but there's a timber merchant only about 5 minutes from our house. So I drove there, and I said, okay, I want a door, and I want a bit of wood, and here are the dimensions. You cut it precisely, slot it in, and then I'll plaster over it. This was my great plan. I don't have a clue how to do that thing. But anyway, that's what I was going to do. I was going to learn how to do it. So I went there, and they said, sorry, our circular saw is broken. We can't cut it precisely to dimensions, but you can take a whole sheet with you. Okay. How big are the sheets? Well, they're 3 meters by 5 meters. Okay. Well, that's not going to fit in my car. I don't have a massive car. That's not going. No problem, I only live 5 minutes away, I'll carry it. And they said, no, you won't do that. You won't do that. It's too heavy. It's, pick this thing up. It really was sort of full stretch. No, I can do that. It's only 5 minutes. And they said, very good. Give us the money, idiot. And off I went. And it was fine. I sort of carried it on my head. I mean, it looked a bit odd, I'll give you that. But, sort of walked along. God, it's heavy. I mean, it's seriously heavy. It's a big bit of wood. And, you try it. Don't look at me as if I'm a wimp. You try it. This is a heavy thing. And, of course, people were very unhelpful. Sort of staggering along the pavement. And people will go, ooh, that looks heavy. Yeah, do you reckon? Started to have a little drizzle of rain. And, oh, that's a funny umbrella. And eventually, had to put this thing down. And after 20 minutes, I was on about half the distance, stumbling along. I thought, oh, ridiculous. Dragging it, can't drag it, that doesn't help. As I was thinking, this is going to take me about 2 hours to go 5 minutes. And I just stood there thinking, defeated by a bit of wood. And then two helpful blokes came along and said, oh, mate, that looks heavy. Do you want a hand? Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, you look knackered. We'll do it. It's a two-man job, that one, isn't it? Yeah, I've worked that out. And these two lads, where are you going? Oh, just Monkton Street. Oh, right, it's no distance. Yeah, I know. But the two of them, and I sort of, did that thing. You want to help. You feel a bit embarrassed. You sort of hold your finger under the thing, in the middle of the two of them. Yeah, I'm helping too. But these two guys, they carried it there. Brilliant, got my straw out. Wonderful. They carried it for me. You see where I'm going. I was taking on something that I just couldn't cope with on my own. It was a burden. I was exhausted. I couldn't walk 5 minutes with this. I mean, it must have weighed, 500 pounds or so. It must have been a ton or something. I don't know. I just couldn't carry it myself. But when someone comes along and says, can I carry that for you? Wonderful. And that is what Jesus is offering. Jesus says, give me your burdens. Give me the lot. You're not meant to be walking around with those bags of cement on your shoulder, those burdens of expectation proving. You're not meant to. Give them to me. Again, primarily, trust me for your salvation. I'll give you that. Don't try and achieve it in your own strength. But also your ambitions for life, give them to me. Because you're burdened by them. You cannot achieve purpose, your meaning for life, without me. Come to me and I'll give you rest. First, it's salvation, but secondly, it is sustainable living, it's satisfaction. Now, we're not perfect yet. That is obvious. So it's worth thinking, what else does Jesus mean by rest? Well, in the Old Testament, it's this. If you go back to the Old Testament and look at Moses and what Moses teaches, rest is both a time and rest is a place. It's both those things. So Jesus gives the 10 commandments, and the fourth commandment is, on the Sabbath day, you must rest. Don't work on the Sabbath. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, the fourth commandment. And what was the point of that? Well, on the Sabbath, all of Israel down tools, gathered in order to remember the Lord, remember his work of creation, Exodus 20, or as it gets slightly tweaked in the book of Deuteronomy, remember God's work of delivering from slavery in Egypt. So set aside, it's a time. Rest is both a time when you consider the Lord and put down your work. Okay? But also in the Old Testament, rest is a place. It's the promised land. So God's people are taken out of slavery in Egypt and taken to the promised land. It's a land of rest where they're told they'll receive their inheritance and they don't fear invasion. They can work constructively without anxiety, without fear. So it's a time, Sabbath, and it's a place. When you get to the New Testament, that is still the case. There is a place of rest for the Christian. It's called heaven, glory, the new heavens and the new earth. And that is when there's no fear. Everything we do works. We can't hit our thumb with a hammer. Everything goes well. There's nothing to fear. That's a place, heaven. In the future, sorry, that's the place of rest. But now, what would Jesus say? There's a time. And we enter into that time now. It's not Sunday, it's not Saturday, it's not Friday in Dubai. It's how we live. We're in the time of rest now. It means trusting Jesus, throwing our burdens on him, that's faith, taking up our yoke, that's obedience and faith. Okay, very conceptual. How does it practically help? Right. So I'm a person who lives trying to prove myself. Yeah, I feel that. I always feel that in the office. I've got to prove myself against the other guys. How does being a Christian help? Well, Jesus says, you are my brother. You will reign with me. There is an inheritance. Do you know what? Even if you never do anything of use here on earth, you have achieved greatness, as it were, just by trusting in me. You don't need to necessarily prove yourself. When we get to heaven, no one will care whether you were a managing partner of an accountancy firm or a bin man who collected the rubbish. No one will care when you get there. So remember what I've achieved for you. Or look, I'm a bloke and I'm Matt Fuller. I am wanting to be in control. I love to control things. And I just, if I can fix things and know that, okay, but I'm Jesus. And I say to you, I'm in control. Trust me. Trust me. I'm asking you to trust me. Daft example. On Monday, so the day before I came out here, flew out Tuesday. On Monday, if you ever meet him, don't repeat this. But on Monday, my son got kicked out of school. He's year 6, so final year of primary school. We're currently applying for secondary schools. He got kicked out for bad behavior on Monday. Oops. Now, and the school is saying they won't write him a reference for secondary school. That's bad, because he can't apply to any of the schools he wants to without a reference. And if he can't apply to these schools, he has to go to the local school, which is fine, but it's violent. They have policemen in the playground. You have to go through a metal detector on your way in to hand in to make sure there's no knives and guns. It's pretty rough, the really local school. I'd prefer my son not to go there. And so on Monday, he gets thrown out. And my wife says, can you go and speak to the head in the morning? Oh, do you remember I'm going to Dubai? And so what do? I desperately want to sort it out myself. Instinctively, I think in my heart, if I'm there, I'll smooth talk the head. I'll want, wow, let's be reasonable, headmaster. Let's chat about this man to man. I'll sort of, persist. I'm a pretty persistent bugger sometimes. I'll grind the man down until he gives me a reference. I'll charm him until he can't do it. So I can either come to Dubai and freak out that my son's going to the school where the policemen take the guns off the other kids, or I pray and trust the Lord. What's your advice for me? Yeah, I think so. I've got to trust him. See, the burden of thinking I'm in control will really grind me down, but I can't do that, so I just got to say, Jesus, I trust you. I trust you. And that is liberating. That's rest that he gives us. You can either start each day fearful that success rests in your hands, fearful that you might not achieve all that you want, fearful that people are going to look down on you. You can start each day fearful, that's not hard to do, or you can start each day trusting in Christ, saying, I'm going to work my best today, do the best that I can, and trust you for the rest. And Jesus would say, trust me. Cast your burdens on me. Come to me. Come to me. The exhaustion we feel, the rest that is offered, last briefly. The Saviour that calls. And by this I mean rest in him. There are no 10 steps to having more time. There isn't 5 easy ways to be more relaxed through life. Breathe in, breathe out. No, it's him. We come to a person. We come to Jesus. Rest in him. I mean, the most simple level, if you wear his yoke, that is, if you trusted in his death for you, then when you fail, you're not crushed. You look up to him, see him smiling. You find rest for your soul. Now, I have no doubt many of you can sit here and think, yes, I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it may be. It's not that simple. I am a Christian. I follow Jesus. But I still go to work and I feel harassed. And I get home and I'm squeezed with time. Yeah, I know. Listen to him. Listen to him. You've got to make time to listen to him. We have a super guy at work, super guy at church. He is a managing partner of a top 5 law firm. So his hours, par is 70, he can easily hit 80, 90. He's bouncing back between London, New York, Berlin, bouncing across them all. And his hours are not, they're intense hours. He's a patent lawyer. You have to have a PhD in chemistry to understand what he's talking about because it's all drugs, and that's why he's constantly has to win cases in America and in Europe, in the UK and in Berlin, constantly has to win cases. He's bouncing around. I don't know anyone who works the hours that he works. And we interviewed him at church recently because he's a good guy, good Christian man, and just asked him very simply, how do you cope with your hours? His answer wasn't complicated. He said, the most important decision I take every morning is to spend time with Jesus. I listen to him. As I open his word, I pray to him. And I have to say, that is the best business decision I take all day. Because he refreshes me and he reshapes me so that I do my job well. If I ignore him in the morning, I do my job less well. Can I just say to all you men, listen to him. That is the best decision you take each and every morning. And of course, I can't wheel him in here to Dubai. I'd like to do that. Because, hey, Matt Fuller, you're a pastor. Listen to Mark Doring say, listen to Jesus. I don't know anyone who works the hours that he works. And he'll say, yeah, I know that rest. I do know that rest. Because each morning I listen. I sit at his feet and listen to him. Don't think of listening to Jesus as a burden. That's a mistake to make. The exhausted bloke never finds it tiring to fall in a chair. This afternoon, preaching obviously this morning, and I had a little hour. So what did I do? I went and found a chair and collapsed in it and had a little snooze for half an hour. Lovely. What I didn't do was go to the chair and say, oh, chair, you want half an hour of my time as well? You want a piece of me as well? Oh, chair, I've been busy all morning, and you want half an hour from me? I don't say that to a chair, in one sense, just because I'd be mad if I did. But in another sense, because the chair refreshes me. The burden falls upon the chair, and I feel better. And meeting with Jesus is that sort of thing. If we, in our heads, have got it that, I haven't got time to read the Bible and listen to Jesus and pray to him, then we misunderstood. Going to him refreshes us and reshapes us for the rest of life. Why would you miss out on that? Hear him say again, come. Time with him restores us, reshapes us, refreshes us. He says to you and to me, come. Come to me, all you who are weary and are carrying burdens that you've placed upon yourself, others have placed upon you. Come to me and you'll find rest for your souls. It's a beautiful invitation, isn't it? Come. It's Matthew's favorite way of describing Jesus speaking. Come. Chapter 22, parable of the banquet, Jesus says, everything is ready. Come and enjoy my goodness, my bounty, my food. Matthew 25, we'll look at this tomorrow, the parable of the talents. The master gives various opportunities to his followers and then says, come. Come and share your master's happiness. It's a lovely invitation. Get it repeatedly in Matthew's gospel. Jesus says, come to me. Not me, to him. Come to me. not doctrines, not knowledge. Jesus says, come to me, relate to me, listen to me, pray to me, come. And I will give you rest. Gentlemen, can I say to you, that is a promise from the Lord God. It's a promise. Don't tell me it's impossible, because God says it's a promise. Come to me and I'll give you rest for your souls. In the midst of your anxieties, in the midst of your busyness, in the midst of your demands, rest for your souls. Come to me. We want to be those who trust his promise. Got to have that in place before we start looking at the clock and how the time gets divided up. Come to him. Let me lead us in prayer. Father, I don't know this group of men well enough to know all the burdens that are carried here in this room, burdens that may have been there for years, burdens that may have landed this week in the form of an extremely demanding piece of work, an ultimatum, a threat. Father, I don't know the burdens that these men carry, but you do. And to each and every one of us, the Lord Jesus says, come. Come to me. Throw your burdens upon me, and I'll give you rest. It is a wonderful promise. Would we be those who, if we've never done that, never trusted him for our salvation, we would. We'd do it now. And then, Father, for those of us who've been Christians for years, would we know more of that rest as we come and listen to him and learn from him and love him? Father, would we know more of this rest for our good and for the honor of Jesus' name?